The ProVelo Super League is a new pathway to the highest level of world cycling. It's giving one male and one female a shot at the big time. For the winner of the under-23 category in the men's, they get a stagiaire stint at the end of the season with the Jaco Ulula team. For the winner of the women's under-23 classification, they get a 12-month contract the following year riding with the Live Ulula development squad. New pathway to the highest level of the sport. Someone who's been near the top of the sport for 15 or 16 years. She's been a winner of Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, a top 5 finisher in the World Championships. It's Tiff Cromwell. I'm Matt Keenan. I'm looking forward to hearing how Tiff got from Talent ID in South Australia to one of the biggest teams in the world. Hey, Tiff, normally coming into these interviews, I feel like I need to do a little bit of homework, refresh the research. I did have a look at a couple of key results, but I feel like I've commentated on your whole career from being a junior coming across to the Bay Series to then riding the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift.
Yeah, I think so. Like you've been part of, my entire career, or at least a good chunk of my career. It's been fun.
And it was one when you got started in cycling. You started through the SASI Talent ID program, and did you start on the track?
Yeah. So for me,
which for your body type was not probably the ideal place to start, I would imagine.
exactly. So it was an interesting pathway. It was a time when cycling wasn't even that popular in Australia. Like, yes, we had the Santos Tour Down Under in my hometown, but like I never went there. It wasn't really such a big event. Like I was busy in what I thought was team sports. Like at the time, I didn't know cycling was a team sport. And I was like, yeah, come to the velodrome, try to do cycling. Here's a bike with no brakes and ride around the velodrome. I was like, oh, okay. And actually within my group, I was probably one of the weakest and the worst. So I think that's one of the reasons why it wasn't love at first sight. But I persisted with it because it was, something to do after school. I always did a lot of sport, but it wasn't until I started on the road where I was like, oh, maybe the road suits me a bit better. But yeah. I still believe, though, track is an awesome way to start because they always say those with the best handling skills have either started on track or in BMX. So I learned those fundamentals of being close to other people, riding in a bunch. It's definitely helped me for my entire career.
It's the quintessential Australian way to start. There's a long list of Australians that have gone from a track endurance program to then being really successful on the road. Do you think that not having success straight away on the track has actually made you a better athlete into your 20s and your 30s?
Yeah, 100%. And even on the road for that matter, like I was a late developer. So then I was racing girls who were, way more mature than me. Like I can rattle off some names. People probably don't remember them, but like Tess Downing and Jess Tanner, like those were two very strong Victorian riders who I did my entire junior career with. And I was always with them, but I could never match them because they were like developed a bit before me and, would sprint me. And then, their career, they went to Junior Worlds and then I think 1 or 2 years elite maximum and then kind of died away. Whereas I think because I wasn't winning everything, it made me more hungry perhaps. And it's like I always was just sticking there, like trying to push myself, trying to like be with these girls or then even beat them. And then, it was step by step I progressed. And yeah, I've always, I don't know, when you're hungry for like trying to get wins, then you're always fighting, like, to work out the process to get there.
You've identified one of the key challenges at the moment, particularly in the men's peloton, because of Remco Evenepoel and Tadej Pogacar. There's this desire to get a contract with teenagers, people coming straight out of the juniors. But as you touched on there, your physical development at 17 or 18, it can be up to 2 or 3 years behind some of the other athletes that you're competing against.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge is, so obviously when I came through, there wasn't social media. There wasn't, people in your face all the time. There was a lot less media spotlight as well, which, obviously for the sport's been incredible how much it's growing and how much access and, self-promotion you can do as an athlete. But now you have all these young kids who are like, oh, I want to be them immediately. I see how successful they are immediately. But reality is like they're the 1 in a million, like Tadej, Remco, like they're these super talents. but then everybody else has that pathway. And yeah, then there's a development, and then it's also the pathways before that, from the junior programs to the continental programs to the elite. And the men have had it for a lot longer where they've had better pathways. I was fortunate in a time when we did have like a European program as an elite women's program through the National Institute of Sport and these sorts of things. But nowadays, like the pathways are trickier. The level from juniors to elites is much higher. Like it's a much bigger jump. Whereas when I was a junior, I went straight from there to elite, racing the best in the world. But the level and the teams and everything was definitely lower than what it is now.
So all those stepping stones for you from racing on the track and then on the road and finishing third, fourth or fifth, then doing national road series races and wearing the green and gold as part of the national team in Europe.
Yeah, so where do we? So obviously coming from Adelaide, there we didn't have so many like riders there. So I then traveled interstate to race against the other riders to get my level stronger. Did the state tours, this and that, the national championships, and then obviously once you became under 19, the goal was to represent Australia at the junior world championships. So same thing, did all the national road series. That's when I first met Spraddy. She was, the one we were all striving to be or to be able to match. Like she was beating all the elite women. Like we used to race the juniors with the elite women, I think just because there weren't enough riders. And yeah, so then I made the first year under 19, the Australian team, second year under 19. Then the goal was to go straight to the national program, but I didn't get a scholarship straight away. And yes, you have the disappointment, but it made me hungrier. And then this was back when we used to have the Geelong Tour and World Cup and some other like women's specific races in Australia, international races. And I raced there, I think, just with a composite team and, impressed. And then an American team signed me to come to America and race there, which was also a really good stepping stone because the US at the time had a really strong road scene, but it was a level down from Europe. So it was like I learned to race, I learned to win. I didn't go straight into the deep end racing the best in the world in Europe and, just being a number in the peloton. And I think that shaped me a lot as a rider because I learned those fundamentals that you need to be a great teammate, but I also learned how to race my bike at the highest level. And then it was 2008, I got a scholarship with the national program. So then it was like I did half the year in the US and half the year in Europe, which was a great balance up until end of 2009, which was also when I made my first world championship team. And then 2010, I went full-time Europe. And yeah, I signed with the team end of 2009, but then they folded. So I went back to the national team. And then, so it was like a false start. But then, yeah, 2011, I went to professional teams. And 2012 actually was part of the first ever Green Edge team.
That must have been an extraordinary time being part of the Green Edge team when that kicked off in 2012. But I want to go back to the fact that you raced in the US, because when I think of the women's peloton and Australian super domestiques, I think of you and I think of Loretta Hanson, and you both spent time racing in America. Is that just a coincidence, or do you think that has helped set you up for this position you're in now?
Probably a bit of both. Like back then, because I think the US has suffered a little bit similar like Australia, where we went through the period where the national series was super strong. Then it kind of has died off for one reason or another. And now obviously it's coming back to life. But when I was racing, it was when, US racing scene was, we had so many amazing races, like both UCI stage races, the Criterium scene. And yeah, it's like you're racing week in, week out all across the country, but it's like mixture of Criterium and, stage races. But the roads aren't as technical. So a lot of US riders are super strong. So I think that also forces you to be strong. And yeah, and then that helps your level. But as I said, it's like you go to Europe and it's challenging, particularly as an Australian rider when you haven't grown up in bunches of 100 riders and then on roads the size of one car. Like it requires very good technical abilities, and it's make or break sometimes in the first years, and sometimes you fail that many times you kind of like, okay, I've had enough, I'm not good enough, I go back to Australia. US, I think, because the level wasn't quite that high and it's not as technical from like the road standpoint, they have like big 3-lane roads, the criteriums are 4 corners, 6 corners, but you learn to race your bike. and you get the confidence. So then it gives you more confidence to move your way through the bunch. So then you can use those skills once you get to Europe.
It sounds like it was a blessing then for you to actually have that slight detour to go to the US as opposed to being straight into Europe. I'd imagine that the biggest challenge, and we hear this often for Aussie riders or Kiwis or even Americans, it is going from big roads, small pelotons, to small roads, big pelotons. How much of it is about being able to ride position by comparison to the extra strength within the race?
A lot. Well, also depends on the type of rider you are, because I can use examples I've had, some great teammates like Evelyn Stevens, super successful career. She started her career later from America. So she was so strong, but it was the bunch skills that often held her back, particularly in her earlier careers. But she could make up for that because she had the strength. Was never like the most efficient in the bunch, but but it's like, okay, you're wasting so much energy racing that way. Whereas myself, because I'm not the most strong rider or the most powerful rider, I've always had to utilize my bunch skills, because it's like if you can move through the bunch with your positioning, you can go way further in the race or do your job for much longer. So it's like if you know how to position, it makes your life way easier. And when we're talking the 1% and 2%, so those who are trying to win races, if you have bunch skills versus just being strong, you'll always go further because you're not wasting all that energy to move up and be in position at the critical moments. You can use the bunch a lot more to save your energies until it's required.
So other than simply racing and racing in tough conditions, have you got any tips for young aspiring riders on what they can do to improve their bunch skills?
Well, for sure, you can go out on the velodrome is one great way in a controlled environment, because naturally it is a much closer proximity. Doing basic skills, I think that's something that's super underrated. It's what we did as we, first time TID, like from riding close to one another, slow speed, side by side, like knocking each other around. Like, again, you do it in a safe space, like on grass, on, an indoor stadium where it's got a soft landing, where you're not afraid to fall over, weaving through cones, and even just doing group rides. It's just getting used to being close to people, not being afraid if they knock your handlebar, and like staying strong with that. So I think it's just, yeah, getting someone who you trust to kind of knock you around every so often, and then step by step, like being, from a small bunch, like Criterium racing is a really good way to learn, because again, it's like fast pace, it's tight corners, that also keeps you aware and alert of like working out, how to move through a bunch. Yeah, like, there's many things, but ultimately the best way to learn is just being in a bunch.
We certainly saw plenty of you doing criterium racing with the Bay Cycling Classic, particularly Port Arlington, because it had a hill in it. That was the one that you liked the most.
Indeed. Favourites, I know. It's a shame that we don't have them anymore, but they were some of the best times. Like, and actually the whole, when I was under 19, probably for the next 5, 7 years, like there were so many crits, we used to have the New South Wales crit series. There was Noosa that was always fun. Yeah, Bay series, like Port Arlington was good because you had the climb and it was technical, the very fast descent into the left hand into final straight. So I could utilize my cornering skills to then get the gap, and then, yeah, and the hot dog circuit down, was it Ritchie Boulevard in
Yep.
Geelong? Yeah, so definitely some great times, and it was always the best way to kickstart the summer of racing in Australia.
Some fond memories. Back to that early period when you're 19 or 20, was there any key moment, not necessarily a win, but was there a moment where you thought, actually, I think I can do this, I can make it?
Yeah, definitely. Probably the Geelong tour, I would say. It was like my first big international race, and actually I have a funny story with it, because I think I was second year under 19 or first year elite. Anyway, I was racing, and you want to impress, like you're just hungry and you're young and you just probably waste too much energy, but it's like you want to show, okay, I can race against the best riders. And in the end, I managed to win the best young rider jersey in that stage. And we had like Anoni Wood won the tour overall, who at the time was like the best Australian female cyclist. And then Ina Joko-Teutenberg. And for me, I didn't know any of these riders. Like, okay, Noni I did, but like Ina, who is still one of the greatest female cyclists, I personally think, and was always like the boss of the bunch. So it was both like intimidating, but standing on the podium as the best young rider alongside these two top incredible women, for me, it was like, okay, like I can be good enough. I can compete against the best. And when you start getting teams coming to you and saying, hey, we want to offer you a ride, I think that also gave you the confidence to say, all right, I can do this. Like, I was fortunate to have great support from, both state federations, so SASI, AIS, and my parents. But like having those doors opening and saying, okay, you're getting those opportunities because you've impressed from what you're doing racing wise, I think that's like a boost of confidence to show that obviously you're doing something right.
And then what about when you did sign that first contract? Was it with Lotto that you signed your first contract with?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you signed that first contract, and then I imagine a lot of Aussies, they run the risk of, we've got the Australian summer, I'm going to be ready to go as soon as I land in Europe. There's a risk of overcooking it.
Oh, for sure. Like, I think when you're in Australian in the summer and also the bunch culture, which is a lot less in Europe, it's so easy to train. Like, you're doing every day of the week, you can find a bunch to race with. And normally, a lot of these swap off, chop off type bunches. And, then you have all the racing going on and you want to do everything because, again, you're young, you're motivated, you're full of energy. So it's, you often see Australians come into the first races super, super strong, but sustaining it for the whole year is very challenging. And we've seen it like from all levels, from seasoned professionals to like young riders, have an incredible season. By the end of the year, they're just completely cooked. So it's a balancing act. And yeah, we've all been there, but it's like having the right people around you to help guide you. And I think though it's part of it, you kind of need to learn those lessons of working out what your limits are and how much you can actually take on to be good for the entire season and where you need your breaks. But yeah, back then it was for sure like you do Australia, you go to Europe, and then yeah, step by step the energy kind of fizzles out.
Well, there was one year where it did work well for you, 2014. You landed in Europe, opening weekend in Belgium, Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. You're winning ahead of Annemiek van Vleuten, Anna van der Breggen, Ellen van Dijk, Elisa Longo Borghini. That is a star-studded list. Is that your proudest moment on the bike?
I think so. I think because it was unexpected. So it was off the bike, I had so much chaos going on in my life. Like I had a few things, personal things going on. And it was like riding my bike was the easiest part. So it's like I come to Europe, kind of my life was a mess. And I remember going to opening weekend, like I think emotionally I was a wreck, but I was just like, I'm so ready for this. And it was one of those days the race just felt easy. And, as a team, we had so much strength. And I still remember we came off the last couple sector. We had 4 or 5 riders still in the first group. And it's just that one by one taking the attack. And, because I always go in the headspace that I'm there to support my teammates, not there as the lead rider. So it was like my attack went, no one's with me. I had Megan Gagne, I think she bruised across to me. And it's like, I think I want it so bad that I definitely did way too much work. And I didn't know if she was bluffing me or if she was just tired. And thankfully she was just tired. But yeah, that was a very special win. Like, because as I said, I completely unexpected and, it's a classic, like, and opening weekend, it just set the tone for the whole year, I think.
It's a huge result, but does it also then bring more pressure for the rest of the season?
Yes and no. I think I managed to roll on just with the confidence. So it's like, I never then said, okay, I'm now going to win everything. It was more, it gave me the confidence to say, yes, I can do this. That year, we had Emma Johansson in the team. So she was definitely like the lead rider within the team. And I kind of enjoyed that of like, I could be there for her right up until like the point in the bike race. And if my opportunity came, then I would take it. So I don't feel like it gave me pressure, but I think then years beyond that, it was like, okay, I won one classic. How can I do it again? Like, am I still good enough to be able to be competitive all the time? Or was it like just a one-off time? And yeah, like I've gone up and down with my career, but I have had, some nice results, but of course that one, well, I've been on the podium there as well before, but yeah, I think if you then go and win every other race in the next weeks, then I think there's much more pressure. Whereas like a one-off, it's more people know you can do it, but there's not the expectations that you're going to then repeat it like for every single race.
Well, every single cyclist, even the best, they win less races than what they participate in. Like, you don't win that often, even if you are the best. Mark Cavendish or Tadej Pogacar or Annemiek van Vleuten, they win less than what they have more failures in terms of the result sheet. So for you then, This next phase of your career, you're one of the great support riders on the team that you're on at the moment, Canyon-SRAM. How do you measure your own personal success?
Yeah, obviously, as you say, my role has now changed. Like, yes, I'd say throughout my career, most of the time I've been more domestique, but still, I took the opportunities. Whereas the way the sport's changed, and obviously I'm an older rider within our team. We have many younger riders. I now have taken on like that mentor role. Like, it transferred a little bit, maybe from about 2016, 15, where I started taking on like the road captain role, which, that's the one guiding the team, making the calls on the road. I was a teammate with Trixie Warwick, and it was like she was that road captain. But then, when she changed teams, then I kind of had to step up and give that role. But then it's also like, particularly now with so many younger riders and with the sport so high and a lot more pressure, it's kind of guiding them and, not only in races and both on and off the bike, but also away from the races, like for them to come with me with questions and me kind of say, like, just giving advice. Ultimately, it's up to them if they take it or not. But, I've made all the mistakes. I've also known what's worked. So I can just give them the advice from my own experiences. And so, yeah, I'm kind of playing that role within the team now. So still there and, the biggest races, like supporting our biggest riders like Kazia Niodoma or, some of our other girls like Chloe Dygart and that. But then sometimes they'll put me in the smaller races with the younger team to really guide them, where then you're less focused on the race result, let's say, and more focused on like, okay, using your energy to be like, okay, where are they going up and down the bunch? And yeah, it's just you have a different mindset in those races. Whereas when it's like the Tour de France, Paris-Roubaix, these ones, then it's okay, we're focusing on our lead rider and guiding the team on how to try to win the race.
From an Aussie perspective, one rider that we're watching really closely on your team now is quite obviously Neeve Bradbury. And I see you as having a really important role in her development, particularly when she came across from winning the Zwift Academy, because that can be a baptism of fire.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really fun having Neeve on the team because actually, and we've got like an old picture from, I think she was under 13 or under 15 when her sister was racing too. And because it was like a friend of her dad's reached out to me who I knew, and he's like, yeah, I've got these two young girls, they're gonna be big talent. Like, it was like, can you follow them on Facebook? I was like, okay, whatever. And I met them at Tour Down Under, like whenever it was. And ever since then, I've always kind of followed their career. And, I saw like as juniors, they dominated all the racing. And then when I heard Neeve was one of the finalists of the Zwift Academy, for sure I pushed because I knew like she is a talent. And yeah, then she got the contract with the team, and for sure it was not easy in the first years. But now like she's really found herself and, had an incredible season last year. But I get on with her super well. So it's fun kind of, being able to help her. And at the same time, she's also just an easy person to be with and yeah, enjoys life, but also when it's on time can be on. So yeah, like it's nice kind of being there because also I think she appreciates the support from me as well. At least that's how it feels. So yeah, it's kind of fun watching her, and I'm sure she's going to have a huge career.
I've seen the photo that you're referring to, and I love those sorts of photos. And for somebody like Neeve, when your hero becomes your rival or your teammate, that's a really defining moment in her career, regardless of how young she was when she joined the squad.
Yeah, definitely. And, because I've been in her position too. Like I was teammates with Judith Arndt, which at the time, well, she had also an incredible career, but, she was one of the best in the entire peloton. And when you become teammates, you're first intimidated, I think, or shy. But then you get to know them and actually you realize they're also just another human being and most of the time actually very nice people. So I'm sure when she first came to see, maybe she was a little bit not scared of me, but shy perhaps. And I've also had with other teammates where they've said, oh yeah, when I first met you, I was a bit like, oh, it's like, I'm just a normal person. But yeah, it's always like that. I think when you finally then get to like work with, someone who you've looked up to and can learn from, I think you both appreciate it. It's also kind of nice to like have that connection.
So put that leadership hat on and give some advice to the young Aussies that are coming through, because whoever wins this series, they get a Stagia opportunity with the Green Edge squad. What would your advice be to them, not on the bike at the moment, but off the bike in terms of fitting in?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think it's an incredible opportunity to have that. Like, and it's great that this pathway has been created. But the biggest advice is definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. That's why I always say it's like it can be intimidating going to a team like Livalula or Jaco Lula, and you have, some of the most successful bike riders, and you're there, you know, not really knowing your place or not really understanding the team culture. And because it can be hard when there's bad races, women have emotions, like people can be direct, but you just have to not take it personally in those situations. And then off the bike, it's about creating a good community around you, like where you choose to live. Because I think the hardest thing for Australians is we do have to move to the other side of the world, far from your family and friends, far from your support network you've been so reliant upon. So it's like finding a place where there's either you have friends already or the team can help and support you, whether it's Girona, whether it's somewhere else. Like, I think that's the most important thing, because you're a long time from home. And when you go through the hard moments, that support network becomes super important.
And then how about for the athlete who finishes 5th or 10th and things don't go as smoothly as they'd hoped and the path has to take a different journey? What's your advice to them?
Never give up. Like, as we said before, you lose a lot more races than you win, or you don't win as many races as what is on paper, but it's about always resetting the goal. So even if you don't achieve your goal the first time, you then have to reflect on that and say, okay, what didn't happen? Why did I not achieve this? What do I need to change? All these sorts of things, and then set that next goal, because otherwise, yeah, it will be a roller coaster. You will be disappointed, but there's always another race next week. So I think that's what you have to remember. And yeah,
Your career is not over yet, but what are your plans post-career? And I'm asking this pitching for an angle, hoping that you're going to stay involved in the sport in some sort of guidance role.
yeah, it's funny because people do ask me, and part of me is like, I feel like I have 1,000 things to move into. But at the same time, it's like, I'm sure when the time comes, it'll probably hit you more like, okay, what am I actually going to do? Where do I stay in the sport? For sure, in one way or another. Like, already, obviously involved with events. Like, we have some gravel events that we've created with some business partners. So, okay, it's not road, but it's one angle where it's still involved with the sport and trying to create, opportunities for people to race their bikes and bring the cycling community together. But yeah, I don't know, like working with the brands as well, or if it is with the team, as more mentor role. But I can't see myself becoming a director or like that. That's not really my interest. But yeah, let's see. I also have some design projects and other things we've got on the side right now that maybe need a bit more attention. But I think cycling will always be part of my sport, once I finish my career.
I'm glad to hear it. And the mentoring role is what I've got pitched for you, more so than a sports director. I think that role of guiding the next generation coming through, whether they're Aussies or whether they're Europeans or whatever it may be, I think you've got a lot to offer in that space. Now that when you reflect on your journey, as if you could go back and talk to the young Tiff that went from playing basketball and doing dancing, etc., and was struggling on the velodrome, what would you tell the young Tiff knowing what you know now?
Ask more questions, because for sure it's taken time to be a bit more confident. Like, I'm probably more shy than what people think, and a bit more intimidated, and have more confidence in myself. Because again, it's like it's taken a long time to be at a point where, like, I'm a lot more content with myself, and not afraid to speak up, whereas before I was probably a bit too shy for that. So those things for sure. And yeah, just keep enjoying the journey. Don't be too hard on yourself, because we've all been there, and we're definitely our worst critics. But at the end of the day, you also have to take a step back and say, actually, like, the career I've had has been incredible. The friendships I've made, the place I've got to travel to, to be able to do what I love as my career is pretty special. And sometimes when you're too tunnel vision and in this, like, um this mood where you're just trying to achieve what you want to achieve, it can be hard to, like, put the peripherals out and see the bigger picture. So yeah.
It's been an extraordinary journey, Tiff. I've been lucky enough to watch it all the way through, almost the entire 20 years from the very beginning to where you are now. At least one more season to go on the contract. Good luck for next year, and thanks for giving us some of your time.
All right, thanks for having me. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how the ProVelo Super League goes and seeing the next generation to come join us in the World Tour.